2019 will go down in history as one of the most transitional years in Formula One. Although the old guard was still winning races and championships, the Drive to Survive boom had just begun, and the next generation of drivers were beginning to make waves with their driving and personalities, both on and off the track. As much as Russell, Albon and Norris were all impressing in their own way, the two drivers who were standing out as the future of the sport were Verstappen and Leclerc. It took us 3 years, but finally we got it. Fast forward to Bahrain 2022, and it looked like we were about to get yet another all-time great season and the battle of the next generation that we were all hoping to see back in 2019. But we didn't. Looking back now, the first 12 races don't only seem like an anomaly, they feel like a time capsule. A brief moment in time where we saw Max and Charles fight for the title, going to every single race not knowing who was going to win, and how Ferrari was going to screw it up. So much of their careers have been intertwined. Not only were they born less than a month from each other, but even during their karting years, Leclerc described how it was always either him or Max winning, and that is where both their rivalry and hatred at the time started. Oh, and of course, as if I need an excuse to also mention the famous Incident video, which when they do eventually fight for the title again, will no doubt start making the rounds. Although Max came into F1 a lot earlier and was already massively experienced when Leclerc was promoted to Ferrari in just his second season, if we use 2019 as the 0 points for both drivers, at the time it kind of looked like Leclerc was on a better path towards a championship. First and foremost, Ferrari were just coming off the back of challenging for titles in 2017 and 2018. Leclerc, within a year of coming to Ferrari, had dethroned Sebastian Vettel as the #1 driver within the team, earned himself the longest contract in Ferrari's history, and also, and there's no really better way to put it, inadvertently kicked Seb out the team when they chose to not re-sign him before the 2020 season had even began. As for Max, Red Bull, even during their lean years, were always respectable and due to their chassis, were always capable of winning races on the right track. But the new Honda side of the relationship was still a big unknown in terms of how quickly they could start challenging Mercedes. At the end of 2019, although Max was undoubtedly the more complete driver, Leclerc blew so many people away with his one-lap pace that it just felt like it was only a matter of time before that talent was cultivated with a bit more experience, and we saw him challenging for titles. Since that point, where it felt like the public perception of the two drivers was maybe at its closest, the fortunes of the two could not have been further apart. Red Bull continued to develop in 2020 before having title-challenging cars for the next 3 years, culminating in building the greatest car in F1 history, whilst Ferrari, after looking so promising in 2017, 18 and even 19, have been caught up in engine controversy, managerial upheaval, in-season development disappointment, reliability disasters, and strategical nightmares, amongst other things. Apart from the car performance, the environment that each of these drivers has around them, I think also couldn't be more opposite. Although Max has had 3 different teammates since 2019, because of how tightly that team is built around him, on his side of the garage he has always had the stability and support which for the most part has just allowed him to focus 100% of his energy on the thing he does best, driving. He has had the same team principle, there's a very clear management structure with Horner and Marco, and although his dad is a little bit more in the background these days and doesn't attend as many of the races, he is also there as another ally who can exert some influence within Red Bull. The Red Bull team is so strong on an operational level from every aspect, be it pit stops or strategy, that I've never got the feeling that Max is under as much pressure in the car, worrying about those things as other drivers. Horner also, rightly or wrongly, always backs Max during any incidents or any drama, and just like he did with Vettel during parts of his career, Horner is very good at supporting and sometimes playing into the ego of his #1 driver to take as much pressure off their shoulders as he can. Now, whilst that environment can sometimes be detrimental to the second driver because maybe it makes them feel like an outsider in a way, it's a compromise that's yielded incredible results. And whether you like or dislike Horner, whether you agree or disagree with his methods, he is a very good driver manager and he is very good at motivating the right people to get results. During Leclerc's time at Ferrari, everything has just been a little bit harder. Keep in mind, Leclerc was first signed by Maurizio Arrivabene from Sauber, then had Matteo Binotto as his team principal for 4 years, before Frederic Vasseur replaced him at the beginning of 2023. Carlos Sainz being his teammate also complicates things a little bit because whilst Red Bull and Mercedes had clear, unspoken 1-2 dynamics during this time, Sainz is too good to be considered as just a number 2. And whilst I still think that if you give both of them title-challenging cars, the raw pace of Leclerc will be too much to match for Sainz, as we saw in early 2022, I think that both Binotto and Vasseur struggled and are still trying now to figure out what the best way is to manage both of the drivers so that they can keep the harmony within the team whilst maximizing their talent. It's difficult to know how much the Ferrari environment manifests in Leclerc's driving, because whether people think it's fair or not, compared to the best drivers on the grid who to me are Verstappen, Hamilton and Alonso, Leclerc has been a crash-prone driver pretty much from his first season at Ferrari. Over one lap, he pushes a car arguably more than anyone else on the grid, but after Miami this year, even he was very hard on himself about the fact that he needs to start judging the limit a lot better. Now, granted, he's also been driving cars that seem to be very unpredictable, and especially with the SF23, there's been a lot of talk from the team about all of the experiments and the setup changes they've tried to make the car less unpredictable whilst still maintaining that raw performance. Of course, I can't not mention the whole pole to win conversion rate, which at this point has almost become a running joke on social media. Despite being on pole position 22 times, Leclerc has only then gone on to convert that into a win 4 times. To save you the maths, that is an 18.2% conversion rate, which isn't just bad, it's historically bad. If you exclude drivers who have only had 1 pole position and 1 win, Leclerc sits 3rd on the all-time list of the worst pole to win ratio, whilst Verstappen on the other hand has the best pole to win ratio in Formula 1 history, converting over 80% of his poles into Grand Prix wins. And now, to clarify, I have never understood the people that hold that bad conversion rate over his head as some kind of justification that he's a bad driver. Having a car that's quick over 1 lap is very different to one that's quick over 60, and it doesn't take a genius to see that most of the time, he's just not had as good a race car as quali car. During his time at Ferrari, it's felt at times that not only has he been fighting the opposition, but also his own team. Ferrari started to develop a reputation around 2020 for being poor on the operational side. But whilst they were fighting in the midfield, things like that went more under the radar because there wasn't really that same level of scrutiny on them. By 2022, when once again they were back at the sharp end, the spotlight was well and truly back on them, and the gap in quality between them and Red Bull became more obvious than ever. The botched pit stop in Monaco, the reliability issues which plagued both of their drivers, and then the occasional crash by Leclerc painted the picture of a chaotic team. I think Leclerc has always found it difficult to balance where to draw the line between trusting his team or going against them when it feels right, but not so as to make them feel like he doesn't trust them. Dictating strategy on the fly and being able to have a 360-degree view of the race whilst in the cockpit has always been a strength of drivers like Sainz and Alonso. Leclerc in the past has struggled to question and dictate his team mid-race, but some might argue that if the team is operating as it should, i.e. like Red Bull, then the driver shouldn't have to question the team in the first place. Over the last couple of years, Ferrari have tried to improve on the operational front. According to DHL, in 2023 Ferrari are on average the second best team during pit stops, and whilst that is a big improvement, sometimes they can still rely too much on just their simulations and not enough on the intuition of the people on the pit wall, as evidenced by the fact that in Austin, Leclerc was left to do a one-stop when clearly during the sprint their tyre wear was already looking concerning. Although this might sound controversial, on raw driving talent alone, I have never felt like Verstappen is light years ahead of Leclerc to the point where you can't even mention them in the same sentence. We saw during their battles in 2019 and 2022 that not only is Leclerc not afraid of going wheel to wheel with Verstappen, but he is more than capable on a given weekend in a similar car of just plain being faster in both qualifying and then also the race. That is something that I have never been able to say about the likes of Perez, Norris, Sainz, Russell, and whilst partly that's because some of them have never had the car to even prove that they can, I still think that Leclerc is closer to the likes of Hamilton and Alonso. Whilst in 2019 they seemed like two drivers who were on a pretty similar level, the trajectory of their respective teams has shaped them as drivers and their careers in very different directions, despite the fact that on a talent level, I don't think that there's a huge amount between them. That is not to say that Verstappen isn't the better driver, because he absolutely is, but I just can't get away from the feeling that, putting the competitiveness of their cars aside, their environments have done a lot to shape them as drivers, and whilst we have seen every last ounce extracted out of Verstappen's talent whilst he's been at Red Bull, it feels like I haven't even seen the best of Leclerc yet. It leaves the state of their careers in such contrasting places. Verstappen's now joined the greats, being a 3-time world champion, and is already hinting about retirement at the end of his current contract in 2028. Whilst Leclerc feels like he's stuck, still in the exact same place as he was when he first joined Ferrari back in 2019. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.